Okay, great. Welcome, welcome. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Joel Bryan, and I'm the Global Director of Post-Sales Support and Documentation here at Legrand for the Raritan and the ServerTech brands. And today we're going to talk about our PDU linking feature. And PDU linking allows you to cascade multiple devices from a single administrative interface point. So this definitely saves you on cabling and addressing as well. And walking us through this session will be Duncan Gwynn, who is our post-sales support product specialist. Some of you probably met Duncan before. He goes to some of our customer sites. And following the walkthrough, as usual, we'll open it up for any questions pertaining to this particular function or feature. But as usual, if you do have other issues that's pressing that you need to get addressed, please email us at tech@raritan.com, or certainly pick up the phone and give us a call, and somebody be there to help you and try and get that resolved. Okay, so with that said, I'm gonna hand this over to Duncan, and Duncan is gonna run the show from here. Duncan?
All right, thanks, Joel. So as mentioned, we're going to discuss PDU linking today. This is a new feature in our latest firmware version 3.6.0, and it's got some great benefits, and we're going to jump right in. So first things first, we're going to log into the PDUs that we wish to link as an admin user. So I've got my demo PDU 1 and demo PDU number 2. And just some prerequisites for PDU linking. Obviously, you know, it's a new feature in 3.6.0, so you have to be on that firmware version. It should be a PDU that features an IX7 controller, such as a PX3, PX3 transfer switch, or in the case of server technology, they have the new Pro 3X PDU that will support this feature. So you need that, and then it also should be the same model in terms of what you're linking together. So we do have the same model here as we do over here. So we're going to jump into the PDU menu of the one that we want to be the primary PDU. So you'll see in the second section of the PDU menus is link PDUs. So the ability to click this button. I can select a link ID for my link unit. So it should be a number 2 through 8. The primary PDU automatically receives a link ID of 1. You can't change that, but you can change the link ID of the link units based on its position in the chain or however you wish to identify that particular PDU. So I'm going to plug in the IP address of the PDU. We can also use the host name if you have that set up. My keyboard's acting funky here. Apologize. And you know, you have to use the administrator login. So you know, since you'd probably be doing this on a PDU without local users set up, you should use the default admin account with whatever password you have defined. So after I click add, you'll see that the status shows is okay, and then I should see the model number and the firmware version pop up. At this point, the PDUs are successfully linked, and you know, we can start looking at, you know, some of the information of that secondary PDU. Once we have it linked, we now lose access to the web UI of the linked PDU. You'll see here on the login screen, it now says this device is part of a cascade and managed by the IP address of the primary unit. So when I jump back over here, I see details of my primary PDU, but not my secondary. So you'll notice up at the top of the screen, we have a drop-down menu. So we can click this and toggle over to our link PDU number 2. And now I can see the serial number, MAC address of that PDU. So throughout the web UI, you'll see a lot of screens will have this drop-down capability now. So if I go to the dashboard, you'll notice that I have both inlet information here, both overcurrent protectors that I have on these 2 PDUs and their readings. Any sensors that are alerted on either of the PDUs will show up here. Any alarms, we don't have any currently, but they would show up here from either of the PDUs. And then of course, our inlet history we see down there. If I go to inlets, I will see both PDUs, and I can drill down into an individual inlet to see more information. And I can also toggle on this screen as well. Same situation with outlets. It takes me immediately to my primary outlet list. I can toggle over to my link PDU number 2 and see outlet information there. And outlet groups, this is one of the things that is now going to be different because we have PDUs that are linked together, so we can create outlet groups across the PDUs. So I can add a group and link up outlets across the different PDUs. So I want outlet 1 and outlet 1 to be grouped across my 2 PDUs. I can do that as long as I provide a name. But another cool feature that we have, on a PDU that only has 4 outlets, it's pretty simple to just create a few outlet groups. But when you have a 36 outlet PDU, it's obviously a lot more work. So in this menu here, there is a button called Automatic Creation. So we call this pairwise outlet group creation. And what this will do, will automatically create outlet groups based on the outlet label across the 2 PDUs. So in an example, 36 outlet PDU, outlet 1 and outlet 1 will be paired up, outlet 2, et cetera, all the way down to the very last outlet. So I'm going to go ahead and do this and click create, and it's going to create 4 outlet groups for us and automatically name them as outlet pairs. You can see PDU 1, PDU 2, 1 and 1, and so on and so forth down the line. So what's great about this is now we have visibility into the active power of that group. So this might be a server that you have plugged in on those 2 outlets. So now you can see the actual consumption if you have your server load balancing the power between those 2 outlets. So that's a great feature. And I can also click on this outlet and power cycle it if I needed to get that server to reboot. And instead of having to reboot 2 outlets or run a Lewis script to get the outlets to power cycle. So that's an awesome feature. Jumping down to OCPs, again, these PDUs only have 1 circuit breaker each, but if you had a PDU with 3, you would see all 6 of those circuit breakers from the 2 PDUs here. On the peripherals page, again, you're able to view sensors across the multiple PDUs, but we'll have to use this drop down to toggle back and forth between them. So I can see my sensors on my link PDU as well as on my primary here. Same situation with feature ports. If you're using asset management, in this case, we're using a power sim connected to KX3 KVM switches. So I've got a power sim connected to each of them. So I see both of those and that their status is connected. So that's good info there. Webcams, same situation. If we had webcams set up on either of these PDUs, we would be able to see everything here. And then when we get down into the more advanced menus, user management, because we now, have lost access to our linked PDUs, all the user management's done through this primary PDU. So you're going to always log into the primary to manage your link PDUs. So everything, user-wise is done here. For device settings, with the exception of network, obviously each PDU can have its own unique network settings. You don't have to have the PDUs physically connected in a cascade, but obviously it's supported with both bridging and port forwarding. You can actually have individual network drops to all of your PDUs and then just link them over the network so that they, talk to each other that way. So the network settings are unique, but network services are, carried from the master primary unit. So we've got SNMP, that's all going to be set up here. We have, SMTP. Any of those services will be done through here. One important thing to note is that our, HTTPS has to be enabled because that is how the PDUs are actually talking to each other. So if you disable this, you're going to see, an error pop up in terms of the PDUs communicating with one another, or you may not be able to add a link unit. So that must be enabled. But all the other services, you know, if you set them on the primary, they will, you know, the other units are affected. But one important thing to note with SNMP is that, you know, the polling is going to change now. So our MIB has a PDU ID that's going to be implemented at this point. And you know, so if you're using any SNMP management tools, you know, I would definitely test this out on a couple PDUs before you deploy it large scale. Let me show you an example here. If I pull PDU serial number, you'll see that I have a .1 and a .2. So I have this PDU ID index that's now available, and it shows me the serial numbers of these two PDUs. And you know, the same thing is applied when I want to look at an outlet sensor value. You'll see that I get my 4 outlets for my primary unit, and now my link unit is down here. So you see that first integer there is my index. So that's PDU2. So that's where that ID comes into play. If you wanted to set a specific ID for the link PDU, that will come into play there. So again, if you're using any sort of, you know, external tools, just make sure that you test it and any changes that are needed on your SNMP management server are made to support that. Jumping back in, when we go, you know, again, all these settings will be set on the primary and be carried over to our linked PDUs. Another thing I want to show here is maintenance. So we have device information. You know, sometimes this is beneficial for us to look at network info. And I can, again, toggle to that secondary PDU and view its information. And if I had other link units, I'd be able to select those as well. You can link up to 8 PDUs total, including the primary. So you can have up to 7 PDUs chained to it. If we look at firmware, so if I want to upgrade firmware, if I upgrade firmware on my primary unit, it's going to also upgrade firmware on all linked units. So again, you know, common management interface, everything's going to be done through this one PDU. Download diagnostics. So, you know, occasionally if we're, you know, trying to troubleshoot an issue, we'll ask you to download a diagnostic log. Now we can, you know, download logs for the entire chain of linked PDUs, or we can specify which one we wish to download and download that alone. So another good feature there to just kind of, you know, keep all those logs in bulk. And unit reset. If I needed to reboot one of them, I can reboot all of them, or I can just reboot an individual PDU. So, you know, the short story is, you know, it's a common management interface. So there will be some screens where you need to use a drop down to get to the desired information of the linked PDUs. Others will be, you know, all on one page and easy to see. So it's a great tool, especially, you know, the outlet grouping, to be able to reboot servers and view the active power of those specific groups. You know, it's a huge benefit. And one last thing that I wanted to show before I turn it back over to Joel for questions. So in our last session, we talked about our mass deployment tool, and you know, we mentioned this section down here, and I mentioned that we would jump into it during this webinar. So if you are looking to deploy this using USB stick configuration, we offer a section down here where you can check a box and then define, you know, the IP address of your primary unit. And, you know, we view column 6, which will be F here. And, you know, if we want, you know, .2 to report to PDU.1, we can put those IP addresses here and link those together. And this is really beneficial for a port forwarding installation, you know, a single IP setup, as we're going to call it, because you're not actually going to be able to access those ports in the link setup. So we could check this box here, use single IP setup, and then we select our downstream interface. So if you're using USB or Ethernet cascading, you would define that here. And then, you know, you set up the serial number of the unit that you're configuring and the IP address of the primary unit that's going to manage all the linked PDUs. So we have all that available. It's you know, there's complicated process in the back end where there's, you know, token generation and stuff like that, but It's really user-friendly for you because you just put the IP address in and click export, and everything's done in the configuration files. So it actually generates multiple configuration files to a USB stick. So if you're trying to deploy this in a port forwarding setup, I highly recommend using this tool to do so. So yeah, I think that we've essentially covered everything for PDU linking. One last thing that I'll mention, a lot of this is in our documentation and the online help, so you can look at how to set up PDU linking and how to display different things when the PDUs are linked. So that's available on our online help at help.raritan.com. I'm going to turn it back over to Joel now. We'll open it up for questions. Joel?
Okay, great. Thank you, Duncan. Really good information. One question I do have is all the linked PDU primary and the links, do they need to be the same firmware version?
Yeah, especially at this point, because we just introduced it in 3.6.0. So they're going to have to be. But yeah, moving forward, it would be a best practice to have them all on the same firmware version. And if you do link them in 3.6.0, if you upgrade one in the chain, the primary unit is going to upgrade all the linked units. So it's a nice way to keep everything on the same revision.
Okay, great. And it'll automatically update those in the chain, or do you have to specify that during the upgrade process?
It will automatically do that.
Okay. Yeah, that's definitely a big help. So I'm going to take everybody off of mute to see if you have any questions. If you do have questions, I just ask that you look at your device and make sure that it is indeed off of mute, and feel free to speak and ask your questions. Additionally, you could also type your questions in the chat window or so. So while you think about that, Duncan, how does Power IQ play into this at all? Does it help with the configuration, or?
I know that that Sunbird is working towards supporting this. I don't know that it's supported at this point. As mentioned, it does change the way that SNMP behaves. So anyone that's using an SNMP management tool such as Power IQ, I would just recommend that you test it on a couple of units before deploying it widespread. Some of these things are already supported in Power IQ, like rebooting a server based on outlet assignment. It's going to know to reboot the outlets on those two PDUs. Obviously, right. Aggregated power data is there, so there may not be a need in certain situations, but for other SNMP management tools that aren't as advanced,
Right.
You may find this feature very nice.
Okay, great. So do we have any questions? Doesn't look like we have any questions that's being typed yet. Let's see here.
Yeah, one of the things that I wanted to point out, Joel, in the outlet groups, as we mentioned before, you're able to drill down further, and when you group outlets, you can see, active power and active energy for the outlet. Those are the two available sensors for a group. And okay. If we need more specific information, like RMS current or anything on an outlet, we can actually click on that to go in and view those additional sensors. But in the case of an outlet group, you only have the two sensors, active power and active energy. So
okay, great, fantastic. So yeah, it doesn't look like we have any questions. We just make sure everybody is indeed off of mute. Okay. Yeah, so it looks like no questions are coming in. So again, I want to thank you all for attending.
I do have a question. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Bruce. I'm sorry.
I just got unmuted. The pairwise feature, if you do have more than two PDUs, say you've got all 8 linked together, does the pairwise simply will it make a group of 8 outlets? if you've got 8 units, it's going to group all of outlet number 1 together, all of outlet number 2, or how does that work when you have the pairwise feature when you have more than 2 PDUs?
That's a good question, Bruce. I don't know the answer off the top of my head to that. I would have to link some units up, but I believe that you'd have the ability to, you know, it would show you what the pairs are going to be before you create them. So.
Okay. I'll have to give it a try.
I do see another question on here, Joel. How many physical PDUs can we link total again? And the answer to that is 8. So you can have 1 primary and 7 link units. So a total of 8. Again, that primary unit is going to receive the link ID of 1, and then all the other linked units you can assign the IDs manually in the web UI. And another thing, before we go, I forgot to talk about how this changes the CLI. So if I SSH into our primary PDU and log in, okay, so now I'm logged in, and you'll see that we receive the PDU name and its link ID here. And if I wanted to switch to another PDU, if I want to switch to my link unit number 2, I type in PDU and then the ID of the link unit. And you will see that it now changes. So I have the different PDU available here. So I can now do power control specifically on that PDU or change its name, anything PDU specific. And regardless of bridge mode or not, this is another question that came in. So these, we've got 2, they're kind of related. So we want to know if it's regardless of bridge mode or not, and does it still require the cascade wire connection? So the answer is no. You don't have to have them physically connected for them to be linked. They can have their own individual network settings, and they will talk over the network without that physical connection. As long as they can communicate with each other over the network, you can link them.
Okay, so if you do that, if they're not physically linked, if the master loses power, do you then lose communication with the other PDUs?
So yeah, so the communication and the other PDUs will, you know, certain things will remain up. They're still gonna, you know, accumulate power. You know, the active energy sensors and stuff like that will continue to roll. And once the primary unit's back up, everything will get looped back into the master PDU, primary PDU, and you know, you'll notice that it's you have the ability to relink. So if you lose connection on a linked PDU, for instance, you know, if a controller dies or something like that, as long as you have the same configuration, you can relink a PDU in the web UI. You will have to re-authenticate, but you know, IP address and host name and stuff like that will remain on the primary unit, so you can relink them.
And Duncan, we have, you know, can you review the auto outlet group creation again?
Yeah. So in the outlet groups here, let me delete these.
Okay.
And so again, you know, this will require firmware version 3.6 for, and you know, it will require some PDUs to be linked together before you see this. But if you go to outlet groups and you click on this icon to the very far right here, you'll see automatic creation. And once that's clicked, the pairwise outlet group pops up. So you see 1 and 2, hit create, and it automatically generates those 4 groups.
Okay, great. And when we're using the Power IQ to do bulk firmware upgrade, do you just send it to the primary PDU?
I'm not sure the answer to that. That's more likely a Power IQ specific question. Again, I know they're working to support this feature. I don't know that it's available in the latest release. I don't know if we have anyone from Sunbird on the call or not, but if we do have anyone, it would be great if there's any input. So yeah, I don't have a clear answer for that one.
Okay. So the outlet grouping creation, there is a minimum requirement to have the IX7 controller as the primary unit. So if you're not seeing that, you know, the primary does need to be the IX7 controller.
Yeah, you won't be able to link on any other PDU. So if you've got a PX2 or something with an older controller running 3.6, you won't have the linking feature. So
Right.
it has to be done on an IX7 controller, PX3 or better.
Okay. Yeah, and I would just add to it, Joe, back to that Power IQ question. When you add this feature, until Power IQ supports this in their release, you know, you can continue to work through the primary interface or as if these PDUs are on their own on network, right? So it won't change anything when you upgrade firmware or upgrade Power IQ. It'll continue to use the same implementation.
Okay. Okay, great. Doesn't look like we have any more coming in, but some really good good questions. And again, as usual, if you have further questions or you want to call us and have a session with us, we're more than happy to set that up, you know, for you and your teams to review anything that you've seen here today. Okay. So I want to thank you all for joining. Thank you, Duncan. That was a great walkthrough, good presentation, and thank everybody for the good questions that you had. This is being recorded and it will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. So if you're registered, you'll probably get a notification that it's been uploaded to our YouTube channel so that you can watch again at your leisure. Okay, so. We're going to do this again for the ServerTech brand tomorrow, covering a different topic, and in a month we'll do another video for the Raritan brand, and notifications will be sent out. Okay, so thank you everybody for attending, and hopefully this was helpful, and we'll hopefully see you again next time. Thank you.
Thanks everyone.